Fred Astaire spent his life looking perfect on camera. Every step, every smile, every bow tie was flawless. Then, a forgotten photo from 1950 appeared online in 2025. It went viral instantly. Fred looks exhausted, broken, almost defeated. Fans are calling it heartbreaking. But the real shock came when they scanned the back of the photo. Fred had written something in pencil that nobody was supposed to see. Those words reveal why he was really suffering behind all that charm. The Dancing King had a secret that would shock the world. Fred Astaire was born on May 10, 1899, in Omaha, Nebraska. His real name was Friedrich Austerlitz. His father, Fritz, had come to the U.S. from Austria in 1893, trying to find a better life. He worked as a beer salesman and made just enough to get by. Fred's mother, Anne, came from a German immigrant family and gave piano lessons to help support them. By the time Fred was only 3, she noticed something special. He was copying the dance steps of his older sister, Adele. She believed show business could be their way out of poverty, and that belief would shape their entire lives. In 1903, when Fred was just 4, he started dancing informally by watching Adele. She began taking lessons at the Chambers Dance Academy in Omaha, and Fred followed her lead. 2 years later, in 1905, the family moved to New York City after Fritz lost his job. They were drowning in debt, owing over $200. But Anne didn't give up. She enrolled both her children in dance school, and by 1906, Fred and Adele were doing small vaudeville performances that brought in $50 per show. Fred was only 7, dancing long hours, sometimes 12 hours a day, even though he was still a child. There were no child protection laws back then. Anne managed everything and pushed forward, even as they lived with very little. Fred also learned to play piano, accordion, and clarinet so he could add more to their act. By age 7, the siblings had a name, the Astaires. They started touring the Midwest, doing as many as 20 shows a week. They earned around $150 per contract, which was a big help for the family. Fred worked incredibly hard, practicing 8 hours a day. He was inspired by dancers like Bill Bojangles Robinson and learned tap and ballroom. But because child performers under 14 weren't allowed on stage in some places, they used fake names. Fred performed as Freddie Austin. In 1908, when they returned to Omaha for a performance at the Orpheum Theater, the crowd loved them. They earned $150 a week and were showered with flowers. But life stayed tough. Adele started growing taller than Fred, and by 1912, the difference became too noticeable on stage. They took a break for 2 years. In 1909, when Fred was just 10 years old, something scary happened. He froze in the middle of a show in Keyport, New Jersey. Stage fright took over. The performance had to be canceled, costing the promoters $200. His mother told everyone he was sick to protect his reputation. Fred was exhausted. He'd already done more than 300 shows that year. He later said that moment haunted him for decades. Adele teased him, calling him the Moaning Minnie, because he always worried. But Fred took that fear and turned it into drive. He practiced and practiced until he was perfect. By 1912, Fred was 13. Adele was 16. They returned to performing with a new energy, creating more polished routines inspired by Vernon and Irene Castle. In 1923, they moved to England for better chances and starred in a show called Stop Flirting. It ran for 418 performances at the Shaftesbury Theatre and made them $4,000 a week. During that time, Fred learned new skills, even as war memories still echoed around London. In 1924, Fred lost his father to cancer. That was a hard year, but he kept going. Adele even taught tap dancing to the Prince of Wales, who came to see them perform 10 times. Their big American breakthrough came in 1917. Fred was 18 and Adele was 21. They got a spot in the patriotic revue Over the Top, which opened on November 28, 1917. They were paid $250 a week, which would be over $6,000 today. Fred pushed their rehearsals late into the night. Critics noticed their dedication, calling their act one of the best parts of the show. It was also Fred's first time promoting himself with a full-page ad in Variety magazine. That risk paid off. In 1922, they starred in The Bunch and Judy. The show itself wasn't well received, but the Astaires stood out. Adele had quietly started a romance with Lord Charles Cavendish, a British aristocrat she'd met in London. Gossip papers began following her, taking photos and hinting at a royal match. Fred had to work harder to keep the act running whenever Adele left for secret dates. The show only ran for 63 performances, and tensions were rising. Then came Lady, Be Good in 1924. It opened on December 1st and was a massive hit. The Gershwin brothers wrote the music, and Fred danced with such energy that he needed a bucket of water just off stage to cool down. The show made $55,000 in its first week and ran for 330 performances in New York before moving to London for another 326. They pressed a special record of Fascinating Rhythm with only 500 copies made. Years later, one of those records was added to the Library of Congress. In 1927, Funny Face opened. It was wild and modern. Fred wore a top hat and tails for the first time, mixing jazz and tap in a brand new way. The show had problems during rehearsals and even got its name changed from Smarty after bad reviews in Philadelphia. But once it opened on November 22nd, it ran for 244 performances, and then another 263 in London. The press focused more on Adele's growing relationship with Cavendish than on the dancing. Everyone believed a wedding was coming. In 1931, the bandwagon became their last performance together. It opened on June 3rd. The critics loved it, especially a slow, shadowy dance number set to Dancing in the Dark. But behind the scenes, Adele had already made her decision. She was going to marry Cavendish and leave the stage forever. Fred tried to change her mind, but she was sure. On March 5, 1932, their final curtain fell. After 27 years of dancing side by side, they were finished. Fred was 32, now alone on stage. Right after that, Fred took a huge chance. He flew to Hollywood for a screen test. On July 26, 1933, RKO filled out a report on him. It said, balding, can't act, slightly photogenic, dances a little. It was humiliating. His pay was capped at $750 a week, which was less than his co-star Ginger Rogers. He was almost replaced after the first week. But when the audience saw his dance in Flying Down to Rio, everything changed. The posters were redone to say, Introducing Fred Astaire. But behind that victory was pain. On September 12, 1933, Fred forced 105 takes of a dance scene in the same film. It was just 40 seconds long. Each take cost hundreds of dollars. The budget went $27,000 over. Studio managers started labeling him as difficult, and future studios used that label to offer him lower pay. But that's when Fred built his reputation for perfection, for control, and for always chasing the best take. In 1934, while filming The Gay Divorcee, Fred got into a serious fight over costumes. He hated how Ginger Rogers' dress moved. He said it looked like a flying bedsheet. 17 dresses were rejected until one passed his standards. He even banned sequins over a certain size. Still, the movie made $1.8 million on a budget of $800,000, saving the studio from a big loss. Rogers finally got equal billing, but from then on, every costume had to go through Fred. Then came Top Hat in 1935. Fred had a dream for a scene that involved dancing on a spinning ceiling. The set was built with a steel turntable, but during testing, it jammed. and Ginger Rogers fractured her foot. Production stopped for 18 days. Rumors spread that someone had sabotaged the set. Fred's demands had made enemies. Although no one proved anything, it added tension to an already pressured environment. Rogers came back, dancing in an ankle brace. The crew jokingly called her Chicken Little because her shoes kept shedding feathers. In 1936, during swing time, Fred fought with the director over a song. He wanted to sing it live instead of dubbing it. He said if they dubbed it, he would quit. The studio gave in. Fred wore a hidden mic in his vest, but you could hear his heavy breathing and slight pitch issues. Some critics didn't like that, but audiences loved it. The soundtrack sold 110,000 copies in just 6 months, and the song "The Way You Look Tonight" won the Oscar for Best Song. Between 1933 and 1937, something magical happened in Hollywood. Fred Astaire, who had started as a Broadway dancer, suddenly became one of the biggest stars in the movies. It all began when he got third billing in a film called Flying Down to Rio in 1933. But once people saw him dance with Ginger Rogers, everything changed. In just 6 years, they made 9 musicals together, and 6 of them became the highest-earning films at RKO. His 7th movie, Shall We Dance?, came out in 1937 and paid him $177,000. That was more than even Katharine Hepburn earned that year. Behind the scenes, Astaire was a perfectionist. He rehearsed so hard that Ginger Rogers once left the studio with bleeding feet after doing one dance 54 times. The studio rewarded him by giving him 10% of the profits, which made him finally stop worrying about being tied to someone else's act. But 1937 didn't stay joyful for long. George and Ira Gershwin wrote 9 new songs for Shall We Dance?, which came out in May. Just 9 weeks later, George Gershwin collapsed from a brain tumor and died. He was only 38. The songs in that film became his final gift to the world. Astaire had spent weeks perfecting "They Can't Take That Away From Me." But once he heard about Gershwin's surgery, he couldn't even finish rehearsals. He wrote to his agent saying he just wasn't able to go on. The studio had to stop everything for a while. When they finished the song, the director avoided retakes to spare Astaire more pain. There's even rare color footage showing Astaire walking back and forth with his head in his hands between takes, looking heartbroken. 2 years later, in 1939, he starred in The Story of Vernon and Irene Castle. RKO wanted it to be a serious biopic, but real-life Irene Castle didn't like how Ginger Rogers looked. She demanded Ginger wear bobbed wigs instead of her usual wavy hair. That delay cost the studio an extra $8,000. At the same time, gossip magazines started rumors about Astaire and Edna Mae Oliver, a 53-year-old actress who played their manager. The rumors weren't true, but they were loud enough that RKO had to tell reporters Oliver barely left her house because of arthritis. Sadly, this was also Oliver's last film before she passed away in 1942. Even though the movie did fine at the box office, it didn't come close to their earlier hits. In 1940, Astaire took on a new challenge at MGM with Broadway Melody of 1940, dancing alongside Eleanor Powell. The studio spent $1.6 million on the movie, and over $120,000 went just to build a giant mirrored set for their big dance number, Begin the Begin. It was shot in a single take that lasted over 4 minutes, but early versions were even longer. Astaire asked to shorten Powell's solo because the audience clapped too early, before he even appeared. That made him uncomfortable. During rehearsals, he was smoking 2 packs of Camels a day, much more than usual. Powell, on the other hand, broke 3 pairs of tap shoes. Even though critics loved the dancing, MGM quietly moved some of his other planned numbers to another actor, George Murphy, to make sure Astaire didn't steal all the spotlight. Then, in 1942, Astaire teamed up with Columbia Pictures to make You Were Never Lovelier with Rita Hayworth. He pushed the studio to try Latin music, and Xavier Cugat's band came on board. That decision pushed the music budget beyond $30,000. Hayworth trained 6 hours a day to keep up with Astaire's exact steps. But in the film's posters, the studio kept them standing apart. And when it came out in Argentina, censors removed a kiss scene and made the film 2 minutes shorter. Still, it became a hit, earning $2.2 million in the US alone and turning Hayworth into his most successful partner after Ginger. By 1945, Astaire wanted to try something new. He took a big risk with a strange, dreamlike movie called Yolanda and the Thief. It had colorful clouds, floating staircases, and cost over $2.3 million to make, which was double what he usually spent. But it didn't work. The movie only made $1.5 million and lost the studio $1 million. Variety magazine called it Astaire's Waterloo. Feeling embarrassed and drained, he said in March 1946 that he was retiring from movie dancing. He wanted to focus on opening a chain of dance studios instead. Fans thought he was going bankrupt because he had put $200,000 of his own money into that film. That figure turned out to be true when MGM's financial records were released in 1974. His sudden exit shocked Hollywood. Gene Kelly even sent him a telegram asking if it was finally safe to dance again. But that retirement didn't last long. In 1948, Gene Kelly got injured playing volleyball and had to drop out of Easter Parade. With filming just weeks away, Astaire returned to save the movie. Judy Garland was so relieved, she said, he made her feel completely at ease. They only made that one film together because her health stopped her from doing their next project. Even so, the filming went fast. It took just 3 months, mostly because Astaire liked to shoot dances in one take. One of the scenes, Steppin' Out with My Baby, used a clever camera trick with different speeds on the staircase, something that was extremely hard to pull off in the 1940s. But it worked beautifully and helped restart Astaire's career. In 1949, MGM still wanted to make the Barclays of Broadway, but Judy Garland was missing too many days. The studio let her go and called Ginger Rogers, who was living quietly in Oregon. She said she'd love to work with Astaire again, ending all the rumors that they had parted on bad terms. They rewrote the script quickly, added a Gershwin song, and adjusted the dances to suit Rogers' style. In just 6 weeks, they were filming. It became their only movie together in color, and a beautiful tribute to the black and white classics they made in the 1930s. Then, in 1951, Astaire did something that looked like magic. In Royal Wedding, he danced up the walls and across the ceiling. But there was no special effects trick. The set was built on a huge metal wheel that turned slowly while the camera was locked in place. Astaire practiced in a harness, but did the final shot without it. He had to time his steps perfectly to avoid tripping on the cables. The studio didn't like spending $75,000 on the scene, but the gamble paid off. Audiences cheered, and critics called it one of the most impressive scenes in movie history. In 1957, he starred in Funny Face with Audrey Hepburn. The dancing was wonderful, but many people were bothered by the 29-year age gap between them. Astaire was 58, and Hepburn was only 28. Some viewers found it uncomfortable, even though the costumes, Paris scenery, and style were dazzling. Photographer Richard Avedon designed original pictures for the movie, and the famous Think Pink number bathed everything in pink fabric. Still, discussions about the age difference never fully went away. Astaire shocked everyone again in 1959 with his first serious acting role. In On the Beach, he played a scientist in a post-apocalyptic world after nuclear war. Instead of dancing, he showed deep emotion and stillness. One scene had his character dying by suicide in his car, as a Salvation Army sign read, "There is still time." Brother. That image appeared full page in Life magazine. Critics were amazed by his performance. He even got a Golden Globe nomination without doing a single dance. A year before that, in 1958, he made history on television. On October 17th, NBC aired an evening with Fred Astaire in full color. It looked flawless, but secretly, the crew had hidden cue cards inside set pieces because he had started forgetting lyrics. He was 59 then. None of that mattered. The show won 9 Emmys in 1959, more than any other program that year. Still, he was never satisfied. He made the crew do one short tap segment 52 times in a row just to get it perfect. But things changed in 1960. During another live special, a blackout stopped the show for 8 seconds. When the lights came back, people saw Astaire rubbing his hips. It turned out he had taken painkillers just before going on stage because of severe arthritis. He had even gotten a cortisone shot that same afternoon. Newspapers started wondering if he was dancing on borrowed time. After that, NBC began pre-recording his dances to avoid more issues. In 1968, he took a controversial role in Finian's Rainbow, a film that touched on racism. When director Francis Ford Coppola added scenes about black sharecroppers tearing down whites-only signs, Astaire was uncomfortable. He didn't like the change and walked off set for hours. Coppola refused to back down and even fired the choreographer who sided with Astaire. The film came out in October 1968 and made $11.6 million. But Coppola mostly filmed Astaire from the waist up, upsetting dance fans. That movie became his last full musical. In 1975, he appeared in Battlestar Galactica as a mysterious doctor. During one scene, he fell and injured himself badly, but kept filming anyway. Doctors later found old fractures in his foot from 1936 that had never healed. The news leaked, and people started to wonder how much pain he had silently endured over the years. Then, in 1981, his final major film, Ghost Story, showed a completely different side of him. Just months before, his wife Phyllis had died of lung cancer. In a diary entry from December 2nd, he wrote that every scene felt like mourning. He even asked the set to be kept cold, so his shaking hands would look real. He refused to use a double for a scene where he falls into a frozen pond. The movie came out in December and earned $23 million. People praised his emotional depth without knowing he was really grieving. When those diary pages were published in 2000, fans finally understood the pain behind the performance. When Fred Astaire married Phyllis Potter on July 12, 1933, the world saw it as a perfect love story. But behind the scenes, things weren't so simple. By 1938, gossip magazines started whispering that Fred's endless rehearsals were keeping them from having kids. Then, in 1941, Phyllis had a heartbreaking miscarriage. That's when rumors really exploded. One tabloid even said they planned to secretly adopt a baby, so people wouldn't question Fred's image as a strong, leading man. But Fred spoke out, which he almost never did. He reminded everyone that their son Fred Jr. had been born in 1936, and their daughter Ava came in 1942. He called the rumors cruel lies. Studio bosses at MGM made sure reporters dropped the story fast. No one was allowed to damage the clean-cut image of their biggest dancing star. The truth was buried, but the pressure of looking perfect never went away. In 1954, Fred's world fell apart when Phyllis died from lung cancer. He was 55, and after decades of avoiding alcohol, he suddenly turned to scotch to numb the pain. On May 18, 1955, at around 2 in the morning, police stopped his car on Wilshire Boulevard. He was swerving. They gave him a breath test and found he was over the limit. Arrest records stayed hidden for decades. It wasn't until 1994 that a historian uncovered the file. It showed Fred had been charged with drunk driving. But back in 1955, nobody ever heard about it. MGM quietly paid the fine and got the judge to seal the case. Fan magazines ran cheerful stories showing Fred laughing with Gene Kelly on set instead. Behind the scenes, though, he checked into a rehab program for 5 weeks. He got clean, finished filming Daddy Longlegs, and even won a Top Movie Fan Award that year. But the cracks had already started to show. Then came a shock no one saw coming. On June 24, 1980, Fred, now 81, married a 35-year-old woman named Robin Smith. She was a famous jockey who had once been on the cover of Sports Illustrated. People were stunned. Headlines asked if she really loved him, or just wanted his money. Fred's daughter Ava refused to go to the wedding. His sister Adele called the marriage ridiculous. One TV show almost ran a full segment calling it a wedding of convenience, but canceled it at the last minute. Fred tried to explain himself in an interview, saying, "I'm marrying companionship, not a nurse or a gold digger." They stayed together until he died in 1987, and Robin never asked for more than the simple $5 million trust he left her. All the people who doubted her stayed quiet after that. Fred Jr., born in 1936, carried his own pain. During the 1950s, when Fred was touring nonstop, his son wrote angry letters that he never sent. In them, he begged his father to come home. He wrote things like, "The only steps I know are the ones you're never here to climb with me." Fred found those letters in 1983, tucked away in an old storage unit. By then, his health was failing. Fred Jr., who had become a cattle rancher, said they made peace before his father died. In 2019, the letters were sold at an auction for $42,000. They told a side of Fred no one had really seen before. The father who was never there, because the dancer had to always be perfect. But Fred wasn't just a dancer. He was also quietly generous. From 1946 to 1958, he gave over $650,000 to dance schools in Harlem and London. He didn't want his name attached to the money. He said he wanted kids to focus on dance, not fame. But his kindness brought trouble. In 1959, the IRS audited him and found unreported donations and strange tax deductions. They said he owed $200,000 in back taxes. He almost sold his prize-winning horse, Triplicate, to cover it. He paid the bill in 1961 and avoided bigger problems. The world didn't hear about any of this until a memo came out in 1988, after he had passed. That memo showed Fred had walked a fine line, trying to help quietly while hiding from the tax man. He also had a long, quiet war with Gene Kelly. In 1952, Fred was furious when Kelly got the lead in Singin' in the Rain, a role Fred really wanted. A leaked memo showed Fred thought Kelly's style was vulgar and too athletic, like dancing for weightlifters. Fred even tore up lobby posters with Kelly's face on them. MGM canceled a planned dance scene with both men to avoid drama. Their only duet was from 1945, in Ziegfeld Follies, but Fred had it removed from later versions sold to TV. Years later, private letters from Fred surfaced, comparing Kelly's tapping to vaudeville wrestling. The bitterness had never really gone away. Things were also complicated with Ginger Rogers. On April 3, 1935, at 2:10 a.m., someone saw Fred and Ginger leaving a hotel room together. That same morning, they were due on set for Top Hat. The studio had a strict rule: no real-life romance between co-stars. A private detective had photos and threatened to leak them. The studio paid $25,000 to make it disappear. Luella Parsons, a top gossip writer, started teasing a toe-tapping scandal. but suddenly dropped the story. In her later years, Ginger said they were just friends. But an old note found in the producer's files warned that one more night like April 3rd could ruin the whole film. Fred also made painful mistakes. In 1941, during a tour stop in Miami, he refused to perform on the same stage as a black tap group called Tip, Tap and Toe. He blamed local laws, but people still saw it as a hurtful move. He later admitted it had been foolish and said he regretted it. By 1963, civil rights groups were picketing outside his Broadway show. Trying to make things right, Fred donated to a civil rights group and narrated a TV special about black dancers. In a 1970 interview, he called the Miami decision his darkest moment and said they should have stomped out segregation, not danced around it. Fred's love for horses also caused trouble. In 1944, his horse High Hat lost badly at the Santa Anita Derby. Fred threw more money into racing, trusting a gambler named Nick the Greek. But during the war, travel bans left the horses stuck. By 1946, his money was drying up. Then, in 1947, the IRS found $400,000 in a fake company in the Cayman Islands. They considered tax evasion charges. Fred quietly settled the case. He sold his Rolls-Royce for $15,000 to cover the bills and joked, "Take the car. It dances better than my nags." Under all that charm, Fred was nervous all the time. After his sister Adele retired in 1932, he started having panic attacks. Doctors diagnosed him with neurasthenia, a nervous condition. In 1927, he even fainted during a rehearsal. Secret medical files opened in 2019 show he was given barbiturates and put through early sleep therapy. While filming Swing Time in 1936, he made MGM build a quiet room just for him to relax. He listened to Hawaiian music on repeat to calm his nerves. His wife Robin later shared that Fred kept a small vial of medicine in every tuxedo. When someone asked him in 1976 if he still got scared before performing, he smiled and said, "The feet are steel. Everything above the ankles is custard." In July 1950, a photo was taken of Fred slumped in a chair during royal wedding rehearsals. His eyes looked empty, his collar soaked with sweat. A call sheet pinned behind him showed they were about to film the famous scene where he danced on the ceiling. Years later, advanced scanning revealed hidden pencil notes on the back of that photo. Fred had written, "2 sleepless nights. Jane still perfect. I'm off by half a beat. Donan wants a 3rd take. Smile, Freddie, smile." Can't. He'd even drawn a cartoon of the spinning room, calling it a hamster wheel. It showed just how tired he really was, despite looking flawless on screen. That photo resurfaced in September 2025 when someone posted it on Reddit. In less than 24 hours, it went viral. People said he looked human, vulnerable, exhausted. Choreographers on TikTok copied the pose. The photo even pushed MGM to announce a restored version of Royal Wedding for 2026. The world had seen a new side of Fred Astaire. Less perfect, more real.